The Pulse Network. It's social TV.
Hi everybody, I'm Butch Stearns. He's Kerry Byrne of Cold Hard Football Facts, and welcome to another edition of ColdHardFootballFacts.com on the Pulse Network. Kerry, the perfect time to talk some football. We're at the beginning of the baseball season.
Yep. It's always football season in my world, Butch. So I know you're a baseball guy. I never deviate. I'm loyal to my sport.
You are. And you're a numbers guy, too.
Yep.
Always a numbers guy,
Always
true at
a numbers
heart.
guy.
Only the Cold Hard Football Facts.
Absolutely.
All right, let's dive right into it, and let's start our show, as always, with our Prime Numbers segment. Again, welcome into Cold Hard Football Facts on the Pulse Network. I'm Butch Stearns alongside Kerry Byrne. What is your title again?
Potentate of pigskin. I know all those big words are tough for a guy from Braintree to say, but
the mean streets of Braintree.
He was the toughest kid on that cul-de-sac.
Yeah, right. I grew up on the mean streets of Braintree. All right, let's talk about coming up on the draft.
Yep.
We'll talk about 5 of the worst defenses in football.
Yep.
Couple of these is with some really good football teams, but they're the worst defenses in football. And as usual, you put some numbers around this.
Yep.
So what are we trying to do in this
We
segment?
called 5 teams with big dreams that were hijacked by not only bad, but really historically bad defenses last year. Teams that really need to attack, and none of them have really done it yet in free agency. Teams that really need to attack great shutdown defenders. I'm just looking at some of these teams. Carolina, kind of an upstart team, right? They have a great, star in Cam Newton, and that offense was great. But they only won 5-11 because they had one of the worst pass defenses in football, defensive pass rating.
So as we go through these numbers, Kerry, in the right, in the parentheses, these are your rankings.
But yeah, in each case, Carolina couldn't stop anybody. They couldn't play pass defense. Denver, New Orleans, they couldn't intercept passes. When the Saints won the Super Bowl, Butch, they were among the league leaders in interceptions. Last year, really bad. Green Bay, they couldn't, teams average over 7 yards every time they drop back to pass against the Packers. The reason they blew up in the playoffs, Eli Manning in that playoff game averaged almost 10 yards every time he stepped back to pass. Everyone says Aaron Rodgers had a bad performance in that playoff game, or the team was out of sync offensively, but you never win NFL games when you're giving up nearly 10 yards every time the opposing quarterback drops back to pass. And then in the case of the Patriots, we talked all last season about this. It's a team that gave up tons of yards, a high average per attempt. And what happened in the biggest game of the year, Butch? They couldn't make a stop in the Super Bowl and the biggest drive of the year. And time and again, you see teams that have big dreams get hijacked by poor defensive performances. And just real quick, Butch, in the case of the Packers, number 1 in the NFL at forcing negative pass plays in the Super Bowl season 2010, dropped to 20th last year. They were not pressuring the quarterback.
So let's talk about the 3 things you want to focus on: their draft position, the key available players, and the importance of pass defense in today's NFL. Let's start with their draft position. So Carolina's in the best position of, or you could argue, the only team on this list that didn't make the playoffs last year. They have the 9th pick in the draft. Yep. So arguably, they could get one of the top impact defensive players.
You're looking, there's all these guys coming out of, the SEC, Morris Claiborne, guys like that. And Carolina's really among these teams because of their poor record, the only team really positioned right now to get that guy. But, the other problem is we don't know who's going to hit or miss. Patrick Peterson, last year, the great kind of cornerback coming out of the SEC, and his impact for Arizona was really as a kick returner. He hasn't yet developed into that shutdown corner, although he has the potential. So, you just don't know. Look at Nick Fairley at Detroit. He didn't quite make the impact we had expected, whereas Houston nailed, especially their first-round draft picks, and Brooks Reed and J.J. Watt. And that defense turned around. Those guys had a huge impact in Houston being the great defensive turnaround team of 2010. But the fact of the matter is teams are built in the draft, and you have to address those weak links on draft day. And these teams need to attack defensive players. And let's talk about New England real quick, a team that really keeps trading down draft after draft. They need those impact players because they haven't really been making plays defensively.
Well, we look at Carolina with the 9th pick. Again, as you said, a top 10 pick is no guarantee that you're going to get Von Miller. It could be Patrick Peterson or Nick Fairley, guys who have not made an impact yet in their first year, or who knows what they'll become in the NFL.
Yeah, no, exactly. But at least they're in the position to get those better players. In the case of the Patriots, you have all these draft picks. They are just in such a great position to bundle those. I know they don't like to do it. I know they don't like to overvalue a particular position, but to move up and get a shutdown play. The last impact defensive player in the secondary anyway that the Patriots drafted was Asante Samuel almost 10 years ago now, Butch. So,
fourth round, too.
And yeah, and it was kind of a find. They really were able to harvest a gem there. But in any case, that team is desperate for an impact player. One impact player for the Patriots over the last 3 or 4 years. You're talking 2 more Super Bowl victories, the way we look at it, Butch.
How do you define an impact player?
Does he improve your overall team performance? Because we look at everything from a team point of view. It's a team game. We try not to isolate individuals, but I cited Houston a little while ago. You know, they had a new defensive coordinator. They moved players around, and they really got impact young pass rushers on defense. And that rise of that Houston defense was the singular statistical success story of 2010. And I'm wondering, of 2011, I'm wondering who's going to be that team to nail those draft picks and really turn around. And you could go back through history, too. The Steelers became a dynasty in the 70s because they nailed 3 or 4 defensive drafts in a row. And what happened? They became one of the great defensive dynasties of all time.
So that's sort of the argument with the Bill Belichick mentality when it comes to the draft. So I would argue as a fan, I'd like to see them stay at 27 and 31 and take 2 players that I think could be very, very good players. But to the point about impact, I think that's the 2 examples. One is you get as many players as you can. And while they might be Jack Hams or Jack Lamberts and Hall of Famers, if you get 6 or 7 of them, you got a pretty damn good defense. And that's sort of been the Patriots' philosophy. So your point about Asante Samuel is a good one. I would argue Vince Wilfork was another one.
He absolutely was, yeah. But
here's the other one. Okay, so here's the 3 guys. Patrick Chung, Devin McCourty, and Gerard Mayo. All very good defensive players who've made an impact in the NFL. But are they impact players on the Patriots defense?
They're not. Let's put it this way. They're not guys who would change in the course of games. I know Gerard Mayo was Rookie of the Year, but is anyone looking at him as one of the premier linebackers in football right now? No, they're just not, even though he did have that kind of good first season. But you really need guys, let's look at the 2009 Saints. The reason they won that Super Bowl, they went out in the offseason and acquired Darren Sharper, totally underrated, perhaps one of the greatest free agent pickups of the last several years. Totally changed around the course of that defense. They were one of the league leaders in defensive passer rating and interceptions. He's one of the all-time leaders in interceptions himself. He picked off 9 passes that year. And that pass defense came up huge throughout the season and in the Super Bowl that the Saints won. And last year they didn't have those players. And what happened? They let a guy like Alex Smith tear them up in the divisional playoffs.
All right, let's finish this segment with the importance of pass defense in the modern NFL. I would argue that as bad as the numbers are on your rankings here, that it's not that important because 4 of these 5 teams on the list made the playoffs last year. One of them went to the Super Bowl, and one of them went to the title championship game in the NFC.
They absolutely did, but what happened? Those weak links always crack in the playoffs. They almost always do. In the case of the Giants, the team that won the Super Bowl, we say we're one of the best teams in the NFL at putting pressure on quarterbacks, and we have an indicator we use it, the defensive hog index that measures your defensive front. Not only that, coupled with the linebackers, how well they pressure the quarterback. Year after year after year, teams that win championships are among the best in football in that indicator, and none of these teams were good at that indicator in last season.
Our prime number segment here on Cold Hard Football Facts today, leading up to the draft, looks at 5 teams with big dreams, all with the same problem, impacting, rushing the quarterback and playing better defense. This is Cold Hard Football Facts on TPN.